The CCP hates Christianity, clamping down on religious freedoms. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. This from persecution.org, the 2025 Global Persecution Index. One of the bullet points, the dramatic rise of authoritarianism, mass displacement, and religious nationalism is reshaping the landscape of religious freedom. Another bullet point, emerging trends such as transnational repression and the increasing use of technology to surveil and oppress believers. And one more bullet point, stories of resilience and church growth, even in the most oppressive environments like Iran and Indonesia, continue to come forward. Well, when we're talking surveillance, when we're talking government surveillance, especially on believers, we're talking China. We're talking the CCP. We're talking the communists in China. And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs out in California, Real Life Network. Check it out. They have some great faith-based news products, RLN. Just go there and subscribe. You'll see Bold and Blunt among their offerings. But you can also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, where you may subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Contains my commentaries that I write all day long at the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcasts. And yes, I'm rushing through that because I say it every time I do a recording. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. And I want to quickly mention, because I always forget, maybe not always, but very often, very frequently forget, to mention my latest nonfiction book. It is called God-Given or Bust: Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths, which, trust me, the communists in China would not want you to read this book. It's exactly what they fight against, right? God in society, an active, thriving church community, an active, thriving community of believers who follow God, not government, right? That's counter to what communists want. That's counter to what Democrats in this country want. Different topic, not so different, but different topic, different day, which I have covered before. So let's talk about this persecution.org. It's the International Christian Concern. That's what the website's for, persecution.org. Let's talk about their latest report. What's changed in the last year? Persecution.org writes, persecution in Nicaragua has worsened dramatically with increased government hostility toward Christians. Meanwhile, in India, Hindu nationalism has intensified, stripping away the rights of Christians and religious minorities through anti-conversion laws and mob violence. And across Africa, there are several regions where believers are facing brutal violence. There is brutal violence against Christians, including weekly attacks and displacement. But there is hope. Hope amid opposition, International Christian Concern writes at persecution.org. Despite persecution, the gospel is spreading. Iran has one of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world, with believers standing firm despite relentless government pressure. The church is also growing in Indonesia, showing resilience in the face of increasing restrictions. Meanwhile, hop on over to China, and this headline from Christian Daily International. China imposes new bans on missionary work, claims it's for, quote, national security, end quote. Geez, where do we hear that, right? It's national security. It's for the safety of the citizens. This was April 27th at Christian Daily. And let me read from this, right? Because this is what we're getting into here. China's latest crackdown on religious freedom. But guess what? The more they crack down, the more Christianity spreads. Isn't that just like Jesus to say, come and get me. Come and get me, Kappa. Anyhow, China has banned foreign missionaries, I'm reading from Christian Daily now, from preaching and establishing religious organizations without prior authorization, justifying the move as necessary for national security. Yes, because Bibles thrown at people, it causes violence and mayhem, because that's a common occurrence in China. So to protect their citizens from Bibles being thrown in the streets, to instill law and order, to bring about national security, they have to make sure the missionaries who are coming over only have paperback versions of the Bible, right? They don't want those hardback Bibles being tossed in the street. They need paperback versions. The latest restrictions announced by the Chinese Communist Party will take effect on May 1st, or let's put it this way, took effect on May 1st, intensifying the crackdown on Christianity in the country. Reading on, the newly revised rules explicitly prohibit non-Chinese citizens living in China from preaching without authorization, founding religious schools, producing or selling religious literature, accepting religious donations, or recruiting Chinese citizens as religious followers. Well, that sort of makes missionary work moot, right? Because aren't all those classic examples of what missionaries do, right? They produce and distribute religious literature. They found religious schools. They recruit people as religious followers. They accept religious donations. They preach. That's sort of saying, yeah, you can come be a missionary in China, but you just can't do any missionary work. Maybe you can become a dishwasher instead. Foreign clergy, still reading from Christian Daily, foreign clergy can only preach if officially invited by state-sanctioned religious institutions, and all preaching content must receive prior government approval. So those Bibles, let's remember, paperback Bibles that are allowed in China for national security reasons now, have to be parsed by the CCP. They have to read them first. They have to approve of the text. And if they don't approve of the text, well, you can't preach that, right? All preaching content to include the Bible, the paperback Bible. Chinese state media have stated the restrictions promote national security, describing the measures as protective of, quote, normal religious activities. End quote. The CCP typically defines normal religious activities as those conducted strictly within the confines of state-controlled institutions. Independent religious groups operating outside these boundaries are often branded by the government as cultish or extremist, such as Christianity. The new legislation reflects China's ongoing campaign to assert tighter control over religious practices within its borders. So it goes on more and more, but basically what this new rule is saying is that if you are a missionary, if you would like to come to China to evangelize, to preach the gospel, to spread the good news, that you first have to register with the communists in China, the communists in the government, and you have to get their approval that everything you say, distribute, read, talk about, did I say distribute? Pass out, I guess that's a phrase that defines distribute. Everything that you do, say, and chair over there meets the religious guidelines of the CCP, that is to say, the religious beliefs of the communists. And we all know what communists believe when it comes to God, right? They don't. They don't want God. They want government. So this new rule basically is a clamp on religious freedom. It's a clamp on the spread of Christianity in China. But guess what? It ain't working. It's not working very well. I know the new law just went into effect, but anytime communists in China try to stifle the spread of God's word, God steps in and says, no, not so fast. And my guest today, Jeff King, president of the International Christian Concern website, persecution.org, has much more to say about the persecution of Christianity in China, the clampdown on religious freedom in China by the CCP, and just how unsuccessful the communists are at stopping the spread of the gospel. Jeff, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It's so great to have you here.
Well, as always, it's an honor to be with you.
And I'm very excited to speak with you because you, in your position as president of International Christian Concern, you have been watching with, I assume, growing alarm, how the CCP is cracking down on religious freedom in China. Talk a little bit about, please, on what's going on there.
Well, there's a new law that the CCP and G issued, and there's a couple points to it, but basically it bans missionary activity. It says you can't use the internet to spread the gospel. And if you're a missionary or a foreign missionary, you have to register with the government. Well, this is in a long line of laws and restrictions that the CCP and G have released over decades and over Xi's reign to strangle and control the church. So the only laughable thing is, and this is really the emperor has no clothes type of law, because they're saying, look, if you're a foreign missionary, you have to register with the government. And they've spent decades locking up pastors and missionaries and torturing them and killing them. So how many people are going to be registering under this new law? Like I said, it's the emperor has no clothes.
If you're an American and you feel called upon to evangelize over in China, is there really any hope that you can accomplish that?
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much detail. It's not like anything I say is not known by the security apparatus of China, but there are a lot of avenues for people to go in and to spread the gospel. Some of it, I mean, first of all, you could always do it as a tourist, but actually living there, there's lots of methods, and kind of in the Christian community, they're known.
So I remember reading a couple years ago about how even the Bible over in China was being changed to insert the CCP more as God than God himself. Do you know where that effort is headed? Where at what stage it's at now?
Well, it's going towards the laughable. On the one hand, there's this constant effort to force underground churches to the above-ground controlled church. That's called the Three Self Party Church, or the Three Self Church. But it's laughable because you go into these churches and they're so under the thumb of Xi. They will replace the cross with a big picture of Xi, and you have to report on who's coming. And then you have to listen to absolutely dreadful sermons like the wonder and power of President Xi's new haircut, or blessed are the loyal to Xi, for they shall inherit surveillance cameras. There's such a huge reluctance. The underground church has no interest in this. They know what this thing is. And even though in the past there's been lots of even some good Three Self churches in this era, this new crackdown era, it's really just driving the church underground. And that's the last thing. Here's the laughable thing. This is the last thing Xi wants to do in the CCP. But they can never figure out that the more they crush, the more they press on the church, the faster it spreads.
And how do we know that exactly? Because as a closed country, how would we as a free society measure the spread of Christianity with any real accuracy?
So here's a quick story. It's anecdotal, but it'll give you the big picture. So first of all, there's lots of surveys out there, so you can get a range. The range, with those who study it, would say the church is somewhere probably between 70 and 130 million. Now, when the CCP took over, there were 3 to 4 million Christians in China. Another anecdotal point that's fascinating. China is now the missionary sending capital of the world. They send more missionaries out to the world. It's the underground church.
Wow.
But so they're taking construction jobs, moving out all over the world under the guise of business and spreading the gospel. It's just the most amazing story, but it's really the story of the Christian church all throughout history. The more you press down, the more it spreads.
So what's it like to be a Christian, as well as you're able to tell? What's it like to be a Christian in China? What's it like to try and read the Bible, go to church, worship God? All these things have to be done behind the scenes, under cover of the night, right?
Yeah, well, it all depends on how exposed you want to be. So if you're going to a three-self church, if you're going to an open church, you're going to be spied on. There's surveillance cameras everywhere in China. They're in the church. They're in the official churches. But they're also everywhere inside. It's 24/7 monitoring, as well as through your phone. And all of this is fed into a massive, massive database, and then it's parsed through AI. So there's a new era of control that we can't even imagine. It's never existed before. And then the AI assigns you a score. So if you're going to church, you're going to be marked down. Your kids maybe can't go to college. You can't travel except for within a restricted area. You can only get, these types of products for food, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this carrot and stick approach to strangle off the faith and reward those who were loyal, or at least appear to be loyal to the CCP. So within the underground church, same thing is happening, though. Complete surveillance, watching all the time, massive spying apparatus. So you have to be more careful. But again, nothing stops it. And I'd say this, think about this imagery. So in the desert, the man who has the canteen, everyone gathers around and says, please give me a sip. So Marxist dictatorships are completely depressing places to live. They always have been. And so there's such a hunger for freedom that can't be extinguished in the human heart. There's such a hunger for freedom. There's such a hunger for meaning and this is part of why the church spreads. So again, the person with the canteen, in the dark, the woman with the candle, everyone will gather around her.
So when you talk about an underground church, I assume that you're talking about people quietly meeting in individual homes. Is that true?
Yeah, homes. You could, go in a forest, in a park. You'd have to hide your activity somewhere. If you're in an apartment building, you have to be very quiet. Sometimes you'd even be whispering songs together, or just even depending on the control, you can even be just mouthing the words to worship songs, and then discussing very quietly, and being very careful about who comes in. They watch to see if someone is a spy or they have real interest in the faith.
Wow, Americans really don't know how good they have it with the First Amendment, religious freedom, right? No, please go ahead.
Well, it's just fascinating because what we're seeing, or what we saw really reaching its zenith so far, under the last administration, was just the beginnings of persecution. That just starts kind of with cultural hatred, and that's out there. There's been so much anti-Christian propaganda spewed out into the masses for decades that we're seeing the beginning stages, but it's nothing. And our religious freedoms are an immense guarantee of freedom to every citizen, and our constitutional freedoms. Because look, naturally we oppress that who is different. That's just our human nature. We're tribal, and we attack that which is different and that which we don't understand because we fear it. And so that's what religious freedom, that's what our constitutional freedoms do. They protect us from one another. And we just, to echo what you just said, we just don't know how good we've got it.
And what happens to those in China who are caught worshiping outside the government-approved worship?
Yeah, well, there'd be a hierarchy of punishments. So, first of all, if you're just, here's first of all the main law. It's not written, but here's the main law. If you're a Christian and if you sit at home and keep this to yourself and don't share it, then we're not going to have a big problem. And curiously, that's really what's been being pushed here in the West. So if you have faith, you don't belong in the public square. Don't bring this in the public square. Don't bring it to the workplace. You'll be attacked. So you keep that to yourself at home. And that's not religious freedom, by the way, thinking about it in the West. So on a certain level, that's how you stay out of trouble in China. Now, so if you were, first of all, going to an underground church, you're going to get in more trouble. It's not major, but you're going to start being harassed by the security services and have meetings with them. And now a whole different level is, are you smuggling Bibles? Are you spreading? Are you evangelizing? Are you a pastor? So there is an escalating scale of punishments you go that rise up, and you can be kidnapped by the state, by the secret police, and tortured and hidden away. No one knows what happens to you. You just disappear, and you fall into the black hole of the security apparatus.
Does that happen frequently? Do we have any way of knowing that?
Yeah, I don't have the current number. I should have it on the top of my head. But there's probably about 1,000 pastors. You could take that with a grain of salt, but probably about 1,000 pastors locked away right now.
Wow. And is there anything that Americans can do to help these people?
Yeah, I just think about, we've got a new sheriff in town with President Trump. And it doesn't matter if you're left and right. You really have to view this as, do we care about justice? Do we care about freedom? Do we care about suffering? And the communists have locked up a whole nation. It's a tiny little mafia that runs the whole country for their benefit. And they crush freedom. They crush rights. It's just the most odious organization. And that's who has been running, and they crush people. They've killed millions, literally millions of people. So the biggest thing that could be done is the economic. That's what they really care about. That's what gets their attention. So recently, you saw the collapse. We've seen the collapse of the real estate sector. And 60% of the average Chinese wealth is tied up in the real estate sector. That's all gone. So they're under immense pressure. And then we have this new sheriff in town, and he institutes these tariffs to say, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna have, it's a different day, and we're gonna have a different relationship. Get on board, or you're gonna be crushed. So there is the beginnings of an economic depression going on in China. That is what gets the CCP's attention. The CCP can never, just like all Marxist ruling dictatorships over history, they eventually fail. The only way they stay in power is like by the bullet, by the blade, by the noose. And so there's kind of been an implicit agreement with the people and the party. And it was basically, we're going to get you rich. And as long as we keep getting you rich, you keep quiet and stay in line. Well, that getting rich is gone between the tariffs and the real estate collapse. And we're starting to see there's just mass uprising. We're seeing public demonstrations calling for the downfall of Xi, the downfall of the CCP, and calling for democracy. We could be sitting at the beginning of a Tiananmen Square moment.
Wow. Talk a little bit about why communists in general and the CCP specifically hate religion anyhow.
Yeah, it's such a curious thing, right? So on the one hand, answering as a man of faith, I'd say it's a satanic movement. It always has been. They crush life, they torture, they oppress. And what they're trying to institute is so antithetical to being human, again, because of our our unbelievable drive and need for freedom, and just to want to live life undisturbed and uncontrolled. So when you have a system, though, that's so unnatural, it's, like I said, it's only enforced by the bullet, by the blade, by the noose. And so they are quite aware of this. And again, they're a mafia. They're the smallest mafia that has captured a whole nation, is enriching themselves and torturing everybody to make themselves stay in power. So that is just not tenable in the long run. So they're always paranoid. They're always watching for who or what could be a threat to their power. Just like a mafia leader. It's such a great metaphor for people to understand the CCP. So they're always paranoid, period. Anybody that can gather people and form a movement would be of immense threat. But then there's also the spiritual, and there's always, because the Christian church is so massive, that's extremely unsettling to them. And so they continually crush it. The curious thing is, the more they crush it, the more it spreads and the bigger the problem they have.
Let's just finish by talking about your international Christian concern, ICC. Give the website, how people can find out about it, and the work you do, but just detail for the next minute or two to finish. What does the ICC do?
Yeah, well, you can find us on persecution.org on the web. And I would say we've kind of focused on the 3 A's. And so there's a whole bunch of awareness. That's not our first duty, but we do a bunch of awareness. So I'm like this. I'm constantly giving interviews, trying to wake the world up, trying to wake the church up to what's going on, to the plight of their brothers and sisters around the world. And then we work with advocacy. So we're centered in Washington, D.C. area. And so we work on the Hill, State Department, and in the government apparatus. And that's oftentimes just to open prison doors through back channel communications. And then finally, our bread and butter is we're out there with practical assistance. That's the 3rd A, assistance to the persecuted. So if a pastor is killed, we take care of his family and get them to a better life, a new life. But we also are pushing the gospel out into the toughest places on earth.
Wow. Great work. Jeff King, I want to thank you so much for coming on Bold and Blunt and talking about this spread of evil communism and what Americans can do to help fight it. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and I love the work of the Washington Times and what you guys are doing.
Oh, great to hear. Thank you. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.